Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Galeo, and all of the panelists. It is truly an honor to be in this conversation today with all of you as colleagues and everyone watching. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. I'm having trouble. There we go. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit today about where do babies come from? We know that babies do not come from assembly lines, and they also don't come from cabbages. But how does contemporary American culture imagine where babies come from? I want to start with a thought experiment. Can I ask you all to visualize the fetus? Capture in your mind the first picture that comes to your mind when I say visualize the fetus, and just hold on to that. I'm going to come back to it in a moment. I also want to start my remarks today with a couple of facts that are often invisible in public discourse. For example, it's a little known and little discussed fact among most people that the leading cause of hospitalization in the United States today is childbirth. It's also little known that the most frequently performed surgery in the United States today is cesarean section. And I'm grateful to Dr. McLemore for just pointing out another invisibility in her quantification of the roughly 8 years that people spend pregnant or immediately postpartum relative to that long 29, 30-year lifespan of being potentially pregnant. Birth and death are the bookends of human existence here on this planet. Both have tremendous psychological, cultural, personal, and spiritual meaning. Yet while we have had a robust debate spanning decades about what it means to have a good death and how medicine should be reformed to honor people's wishes and beliefs in dying, we have lacked a parallel societal discussion about what it means to have a good birth, or how we can best care for and support people through the birthing process in a way that honors and respects them as individuals and the sacredness of birth itself. In fact, we have startling new evidence that reproductive care is actually a site of disempowerment, abuse, degradation, and belittlement, that obstetric violence and obstetric racism permeate the way we care for pregnant and birthing people in the United States today, and that these burdens fall most heavily on women, pregnant and birthing people who experience structural disadvantage, racism, and other systemic obstacles to their humanity. All of these examples of invisibility that I am giving you today illustrate what anthropologists Rainer Rapp and Faye Ginsburg have called the invisible centrality of reproduction. Reproduction is central to human society. It's the foundation of families, of kinship systems, of communities, of nations, of the entire global economy. And yet pregnancy and birth and reproduction more generally are often marginalized and pushed to the edges of society. They're rarely centered the way they're being centered in this conversation today. Not only are pregnant people, pregnant and birthing women, and new mothers often invisible in public discourse, when they are visible, they're often treated as means to an end, as mere vessels. The reasons for this invisibility are deep and multidimensional. I'd like to focus today on the role of popular culture, particularly visual culture, in both reflecting and perpetuating the cultural invisibility of reproduction and the people who are central to it, most often, but not exclusively, women and girls and everyone else with capacity for pregnancy. So in order to do that, let me go back to the question I asked you a few minutes ago. How many of you, I know I can't see a show of hands, but many of you may have seen something like this when I asked you to visualize the fetus, an ultrasound, a medical ultrasound image. Others of you may have seen something like this, a free-floating fetus or embryo at various stages of development. Probably very few of you, when I asked you to visualize a fetus, saw something like this, the fetus located inside the body of a pregnant woman. And I use this thought exercise to illustrate 2 points. First, the ubiquity of the fetus as a visible icon. 100 years ago, most of us would not have been able to visualize a fetus. It was not an image or a picture that was readily accessible to most of us in popular culture. Today, fetuses are everywhere. Fetal imagery is ubiquitous in popular culture and in political discourse. The second thing this thought exercise helps to illustrate is the historic disconnection of the fetus from the pregnant body in which it necessarily and always resides. Fetuses do not exist. They cannot be alive except inside another human being, inside another person's body, often, although not exclusively, a woman's body. So how and why did we come to separate the fetus from the pregnant woman? And what are the consequences of doing so? Well, the visual roots of the ubiquity of the fetus begin in 1965 with a photo essay published in Life magazine, which purported to show the drama of life before birth. Many of you will have seen these images or images like them. These were made by Lennart Nilsson, a Swedish photographer. Since Nilsson published these photographs in Life magazine in 1965, images like this have become ubiquitous in American culture, not in part through the work of the pro-life movement, but also through medical imagery. And in fact, medical technology has been another important conduit of making fetuses visible. Most pregnant women, pregnant people in the United States today receive multiple ultrasounds during pregnancy, and the ultrasound image itself has been popularized and domesticated. It's moved outside of the realm of medical technology exclusively into popular culture. You can see some examples here where a medical tech wrote, "Hi, mom and dad, see you soon," on the medical ultrasound image. And we also see the way medical ultrasound images are used in popular culture. We also see the commodification and the turning the fetus into both a consumer object and the fetus itself as a consumer, personifying the fetus as a consumer. All of these images of the fetus perpetuate the idea that the fetus is somehow separate and distinct from the pregnant woman. The images that I've shown you take the fetus outside of the context of the pregnant person's body and make it into a distinct individual on its own. And indeed, when we picture pregnant women in popular culture, we have a tendency to imagine them as animals, as storks, or as fruits, or vegetables, or other kinds of containers, as these images suggest. And moreover, images of pregnant women in popular culture often perpetuate a kind of symbolic violence. So I'm just going to show you a couple of Google image searches. The first one here is for pregnancy, and the next one is for pregnant woman. I search for pregnant woman here. If you look at these images, you can see that the majority of them depict a pregnant abdomen only. The person who is pregnant is depicted without a head, sometimes limbless. And in fact, for the screenshot, let me go back to this one. This screenshot here, there are 44 images, 38 of them depict a pregnant woman, 21 of those include a head, and only 14 show that pregnant woman's face. If we look at the second set of images, there's 66 images, only 41 depict a pregnant woman with a head, only 31 depict her with a face, and in only 4 of the images is the pregnant person looking directly back at the viewer. So even our images of pregnancy, when they're not explicitly about the fetus, have the feature of depersonifying and dehumanizing the pregnant person. From these images, it would appear that headlessness and even limblessness are common side effects of pregnancy. In other words, so much about our popular culture, our popular visual culture, serves to elevate the fetus and make the pregnant woman or the pregnant person invisible. I argue that this symbolic representation of pregnancy and pregnant people both reflects and perpetuates cultural and political attitudes that treat pregnant bodies as disposable and as inconsequential. But in fact, the best guarantor of fetal health and well-being has always been maternal health and well-being. We need to make women visible again. We need to make women and pregnant people visible again in order to recenter mothers in public health. I look forward to the discussion.